Thank you. Well, Gary is on step 4 tonight, so I don't want to cut into his time. We've been loving the first 3 weeks and looking forward to hearing the 4th step. It's all yours, Gary.
You're too sweet, Lily. Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. I'm an alcoholic, and my name is Gary Kincaid. And I am really, 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 really grateful for a sobriety date and a new life that started July 25th of 1994. Started out in Odessa in West Texas. Today I live in Sulphur Springs, a little town about maybe 100 miles due east of Dallas. And a little town where it seems like all the internet went out today, so I've had to hustle around. I found the Pilot truck stop, so my first deal was I'd go sit in the parking lot at the truck stop, and then I found a friend that's got some kind of special internet stuff, so she's let me borrow hers for this hour. So I'm glad I'm able to be with y'all. And that's about all the technical knowledge I know. I turned this thing on, put in the password, and here we are. Step 4. I don't know where everyone is in your walk through the steps. I imagine most of you, or many of you, have been surrendered to this way of living for a long, long time. What I try to do in sharing my experience on these steps is to say, first of all, I never say this is a study. I'm not here to teach anybody anything. I want to stay away from being a teacher. I'd much rather be a practitioner. What I try to do is share my experience. And in doing that, I'm never about the business of telling anyone they're doing it right or they're doing it wrong, unless I'm sponsoring them, and then I'm going to be pretty direct with that. So I'm going to share with you from both my first experience through the steps and then my later experience of being able to look back and try to combine those two things. We used to hear a lot in meetings when I got sober, you have to do this for yourself. And I'd hear people say, I've been to AA before, but this time I'm doing it for me. And I'm not saying whether that's right or wrong. I'm just sharing with you what my sponsor said to me. He said, Gary, you are not doing this for yourself. You've been doing everything for yourself your whole life. You're doing this for others. You have to do it yourself, but you're not doing it for yourself. And with that in mind, I shared with you last week the first time I took that third step prayer. It was a surprise to me. Did that on a Saturday morning. The next Thursday night, I'm in Jerry's house. We read step 4 together out loud in the book. And then at the end of that night, he said, that's next for you. Now let's do the third step prayer, because you're going to follow along exactly the way the book talks about it. So in doing that fourth step that night, and then he's going to follow up Saturday morning. I'll tell you this, we did that on Thursday night. Saturday morning, I got to his house around 11 o'clock. He set out a pad on the table and a pen and a big book and said, I'm going to town. I'll be back in a few hours and we'll do your fifth step. Now, that was my experience with it. And I'll tell you, I've had that experience. I'm just pulling numbers out here. I'm saying I've probably gotten this far with maybe 100 or so people in the time. That's the way I do the steps with people. We read out loud in the book. When it comes time to do something, we do it. And then I generally do the same thing that Jerry did with me. I have them give them a couple hours to write their fourth step, and then I sit down and help them finish it, the parts they were stuck on. But we turn back to page 63 on that Saturday when he's let me know I'm getting ready to write my fourth step. And I tell people I'd been to just enough meetings to know that wasn't right. I'd heard just enough people share, you need to take your time. You better get all this down right. Or, I'm going to give you a month to write it. So I'm sitting there thinking, my sponsor's doing this all wrong. But I went ahead and followed his instructions. But he started that Saturday with this: when we sincerely took such a position, this idea that we have a new employer, all sorts of remarkable things happen. Being all powerful, he provided what we needed if we kept close to him and performed his work well. Established on such a footing, we became less and less interested in ourselves, our little plans and designs. More and more, we became interested in seeing what we could contribute to life. As we felt new power flow in, as we enjoyed peace of mind, as we discovered we could face life successfully, as we became conscious of his presence, we began to lose our fear of today, tomorrow, or hereafter. We were reborn. And Jerry pointed out to me, Gary, that hadn't happened yet. It doesn't happen right here. Staying close to him and performing his work well means you're going to give your all to steps 4 through 9. And then Jerry said, I promise you, if you're willing to do that and if you'll try, those promises that we just read right there will come true. And they won't all happen by next Thursday. Your life won't all be fixed real quick, but you'll begin to understand a closeness with your Creator you never knew before. And then he had me kneel on the floor with him, and we took the prayer again. And I've done that with every person I've ever done a fourth step with, is we're going to start the fourth step with the third step prayer. And in that light, looking back, it makes so much more sense, has so much more meaning for me than if we hadn't done it that way. God, I offer myself to thee. And I point out to you, if you're new and you haven't done this yet, I don't even know what I'm offering. I don't have a clue of who I am. I'll throw in a little addendum here. I kept getting taken back to page 18. And he reminded me that one of the reasons that we're doing these steps is to become properly armed with facts about ourselves. So when the time comes, we can be that alcoholic sitting down with another alcoholic. And if we're properly armed with facts about ourselves, we can win their entire confidence in a matter of hours. And he pointed out to me, you don't know anything about yourself right now. You're fixing to find out some stuff about you that's going to change the entire story of who you are that you brought in here with you to Alcoholics Anonymous. You're fixing to get a real look at that life and not your subjective look at it. So it says, I offer myself to thee to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me, and I'll point out to you, if you're new, we find 2 promises that I found to be true from this program. Bill's going to promise us victory over alcohol. And I have found victory over alcohol. And we get promised relief from bondage of self. It doesn't say release. It says relief. And that is a clue to me that that's something I now seek on a daily basis. And that's what I find 10, 11, and 12 to do, is to give me relief today from the bondage of self so I can better do thy will. And God's will seems to be helping and loving unlovable people. So it's my job to try to fall into that, since I am one of those. I may have said last week, not sure what I said last week, but that's okay, because I don't think y'all remember either, so I can repeat myself, and it's okay in AA. I had grown up my whole life with that idea that you're supposed to love God and trust people. And I'm one of those that got here and said, well, I've got real trust issues. I can't trust people anymore. And what I'm going to find out in this program is I always had that backwards. I'm supposed to trust God and love people. And that has been a life-changing direction for me. It didn't just happen with me understanding it, with a continual surrender to this program. I find it much, much easier today to put my trust in a higher power and to try to just give my love and tolerance and understanding and friendship to people, and to look to God for my needs to be met emotionally, and not so much to people. But we'll get into that more as we get into the fifth step. Build with me and do with me as thou wilt, relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Now, I'd have probably stopped that prayer right there. I don't believe I'd have added this next part. Take away my difficulties. Now, I'd have prayed that, but I would not have added that victory over them might bear witness to those I would help. Of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life, may I do thy will always. I didn't sign up when I got run into AA to be of service to other people. I didn't sign up for love and tolerance. I didn't sign up for anything but trying to get away from what had me. I didn't know what you people had. I didn't know what I was going to find in here. But he begins, first of all, subtly, and from this point on, it's not subtle. We are here to be of maximum benefit to God and our fellow man. We're here to be servants. And that was a whole new idea to me in reality. So then Jerry pointed out, and that prayer with him was very meaningful that Saturday morning. And he pointed out, as we get into step 4, that this was only a beginning, though if honestly and humbly made, in fact, sometimes a very great one was felt at once. Next, and Jerry said that's why we're doing the 4th step here today, because next to him meant next. That's the next, it's right now. It's not next month or next season or after Christmas. It means once I have committed myself with some kind of understanding to step 3 of saying, okay, Pop, I don't have really any clue of exactly why it happened, but I now know I brought to AA a totally messed up life. And every area of it needs a lot of work. So I'm going to give all of this mess that's me, that I seem to not be able to manage to fix. And with me not managing to fix it, I continue to stay in those bedevilments. And I continue to drink because I don't have any way to be okay in my own skin. So next for me, I didn't understand it that day, but my sponsor did, was let's get busy and do a course. And if you're new here, he's not making light of this. Look at some of the words he used. A course of vigorous action. Look up the word vigorous. I believe those 2.5 to 3 hours I sat there in his kitchen may be some of the hardest work I've ever done in my life, to try and get started doing the resentments and the fears and the sexual inventory. It was hard work. We did have a saying out in West Texas, and I'll throw it your way for anybody that is stuck on step 4. Well, the old timers out there said, what you do is you get up off your knees, you put a pen in your hand, your butt in a chair, and you start writing. That's the West Texas instructions for writing the 4th step. Pen in hand, butt in chair. So if you've been stuck, you might try that. Now, I'm not saying this to offend anybody. This is my experience. And I hope you'll hear it in the way I'm going to share it. I'm going to share it anyway. I mentioned to you last week that this spiritual walk of ours is teaching me a new math. When I was in the 1st grade, we didn't have kindergarten back then. When I was in the 1st grade, I was there the day they talked about addition. But evidently, I was not there the day they talked about subtraction. So part of my life story is my whole life, I've been trying to add things to me to make me okay, to make me attractive, to make me successful. That what I needed was something added, something more, something out there. And it could be material things, it could be education, it could be a mate, it could be just more. I needed something out there. If I could gather enough, then I would be okay. Now, I'll tell you what I discovered, new folks. This spiritual walk of ours, spirituality for me is always addition by subtraction. I did not need anything added to my life when I got brought to you people. I needed some things removed. I shared with you out of that 3rd step, the magnificent discovery for me. I've never needed more God in my life. I've always needed less me. If I can get me out of the way, all that's left is God. And this 4th through 9, and my sponsor told me, and it's the way I've shared it with all the people I work with, 4 through 9 is really 1 step in 5 parts. And the only admonition that Jerry gave me, he said, Gary, if you're not going to be willing to go on through the 9th step under my guidance, let's don't even get started at this table today. Because something's going to get started in the 4th step, but nothing is going to get completed in the 4th step. So if you will, taking the analogy that works for me, I call alcoholism spiritual constipation. What I discovered is I had things inside of me. Some of them I'd had since I was 4 years old, and some of them I'd picked up since I'd been coming to AA for those 3 or 4 weeks before we did this 4th step. I had things inside of me that I could not get rid of. And they were things that were blocking me from what Bill calls the sunlight of the Spirit. Or if we go to the prayer of St. Francis, which Bill said is the whole program of AA written on 3/4 of a page, said better than he could say it in 164 pages. But I had a channel that it was blocked. And until I could get that channel clean, till I could get this stuff out of me, there was going to be no sunlight of the Spirit. There was going to be no love, no understanding, no forgiveness, because nothing could get out of me because of the stuff that was in there that was blocking me. And y'all called those resentments. I had no way to get rid of. And you called those fears, mostly self-centered fear. I had no way of getting rid of it. And you called that harms done to others, particularly around my sex life. And the way that sex life was like a rock thrown in the pond. The ripples went out to hit my children and my in-laws and other people's. I mean, it just went on and on and on. And I didn't have any way of getting rid of that stuff. And I needed some way to be empty of me. So that process of letting God now construct a new life for me, first of all comes the tear down or the deconstruction or the getting rid of. Now, I'm from Texas, so we can get away with being a little crude every now and then. Have any of you ever been physically constipated? Or am I the only one? You know, when that happens, what you do is you say, yeah, I know this is real uncomfortable, but I'm not in any hurry to get unconstipated. I think I'm going to spend a few months kind of deciding, what was it I ate? Who fed that to me? I need to find out why I'm this way. We never do that with physical constipation. We just want some relief and to get that stuff out. Well, that's the way I've experienced release spiritually. If I had waited until I understood what I was doing, you would have another person sharing with me. I didn't need to know what I ate or who fed it to me or any of that stuff. I just needed it out, and I didn't have any way to get rid of it. Now again, go to your experience before recovery. Do you remember all those times, maybe in the bars, maybe in your kitchen, talking with your friends or the people you were drinking with, or even to yourself? I had more conversations with me than I had with anybody else. Remember all those conversations you had about your resentments? I don't know if I ever had one in my life. Now, I was worried about whether I could do this process this quickly, and Jerry reminded me, he said, Gary, you could tell 3/4 of your resentments to a stranger sitting next to you in a bar in about 10 minutes. And you've probably done that 100 times. Or with your best friend when you're bitching about your mother-in-law or your wife or your husband or your boss. You don't need to go too far to find somebody to talk about them. Only now we want you to just put them down on paper. I thought I was one of those people that did not have resentments. I thought I was a carrier. I just left them everywhere I went. But you know, when I sat down and started writing, I discovered I had a few. And if you read through the instructions on 64 and 65, he tells us that we're going to do this inventory the same way we do a business inventory. Now, I don't know where you're seated right now, but I'm at a desk in my friend's house. And if I were to inventory this desk, I'd say there's 2 file folders over here. There's a deck of cards here. There's a couple of boxes here. There's a bowl of candy here. And I just do the inventory of that. I would not add to it. Well, that bowl of candy was given to me by my great-grandmother before she died, and it has wonderful meaning to me. The deck of cards there was what my grandpa had left me, and I'm so mad because my wife lost it. I wouldn't put all the emotion into it. I just write down what's there. I'm trying to get an objective look. And he told me to do the columns. You do column 1 all the way down. Then column 2, what happened. He said, just write enough to jog your memory. Don't write a thesis on it. And he told me on the 3rd column to use the ones that were in the book. But he reminded me and had me read again what I share with y'all. Resentment is the #1 offender. Now, I've still got in my mind, when I'm sitting at that kitchen table that day, that my resentment of a couple of my ex-wives and one set of in-laws and one bishop and my brother and my daddy, that they were the cause. And the book says, and my sponsor says, no, it ain't them, it's your resentment of them. And that's a real subtle, thin line for somebody like me, brand new, to understand. But I'm going to understand it in about 4 hours from the time I started writing it, I can tell you that. The #1 offender, and many of you have heard this, listen to his language. It destroys more alcoholics than anything else. I guess that means whiskey. It destroys more alcoholics than alcohol does. And you and I know that's true because we've been in AA for 30 days to 40 years, and we have seen people in our fellowship whose lives have been totally destroyed by their resentments, and they didn't add any alcohol to it. These things are poison. So I don't want to wait 4 or 5 months. Another way, the reason I tell my guys, we're not going to wait very long to get into this process. Resentment's like a cancerous tumor inside of it. The longer it's there, the more it's spreading to other places. I want to get it out of me as quick as I can. I don't want to say, well, I better, if I've got my annual physical Thursday, if my doctor comes back and said, we've discovered some spots and your blood work's pretty poor, I'm not going to say, well, doc, I believe I'd like to spend about a year and I'm going to do a lot of reading and research on why that might have happened. I'm not going to say that. I'm going to say, what's next? Get me started with something. I need to get that out now, as quick as I can. And that's what this 4th step process did for me. Here's one of the most beautiful lines. And I'll tell you what, folks, this is a line, but it's a promise in my life. And I had never, ever, ever considered this. And remember, I'd been a pastor and I'd been a therapist. And this was news to me. When the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. Who would have thought? I've been going about it backwards my whole life. I've been trying to take care of the physical, the more stuff. Mentally, well, I've read every self-help book. Most of them, I would think I could have written a better book. I've gone to counseling, therapy, psychiatrists, both voluntarily and involuntarily. And I am brilliant. I hate to tell you all that because I'm telling a room full of brilliant people, but I always valued my intellect. I could read and understand and figure things out. That must be the reason that on July the 25th of 1994, I didn't have a car that ran. I didn't have a job. My kids wouldn't talk to me. I'm going through another divorce. I bump into my liver when I turn around. My brilliance did not seem to address any of those issues, along with a great many others. And he's introducing me to get right spiritually, and everything else will follow. And I share that with you knowing that that is tough. This is where faith begins to really creep in. Because I'm thinking, if I don't do something right now to try to heal this relationship with my son, it'll be gone forever. I just don't know if I can hold on and wait for all this spiritual mumbo jumbo to kick in. Because if I don't do something now, it might never happen. And it became a real act of faith on my part to take my sponsor's instruction. Keep your mouth off the people you love. Don't you go try to fix anything. Certainly don't go tell any of them you're going to A&A now. They don't care. Because they've heard too many things from me before then. So trusting the spiritual process, I know, people, it's a hard thing to do. And I'm telling you, I couldn't have done it without a sponsor who had absolute, total faith in this simple program of recovery. He knew what he was doing, and he knew what would happen to me or any person if we, with just a little degree of willingness and thoroughness and honesty, would start attempting this process. He knew it would work for me, so he wasn't letting me go chase rabbits of what do I do about my kid? What do I do about the IRS? What do I do about the law? And he'd say, I don't know. We're going to do this spiritual program of recovery. And I thank God today that he didn't become my marriage counselor or my financial advisor or my lawyer or anything else. He was my sponsor into the actions of these steps out of this book. And if you're new here, he didn't do it so I would have his experience. He did it so I'd get to have mine. And today I understand that more than I ever have in my life. I don't know how much time, y'all can read, but he spends 3 pages on these resentments. And I've got, you got to look at where they come in the book. On page 66, they come after. This reading comes after I've done those first 3 columns. I had to do the action of listing the people and the principles in the institutions. I had to say, this is what they did, and this is how it's affected me. And then after that comes this paragraph. It's plain that a life which includes deep resentment leads only to futility and unhappiness. Well, I've done the first 3 columns. I can see I've got some deep resentments, and I know about futility and unhappiness. I got introduced to that on page 25. You know, when I came in here, and that's one of the first things I could identify with. In the chapter, there is a solution. We had come to believe in the hopelessness and the futility of life as we've been living. Well, I'm telling you, folks, when I got here, I don't know if I believed in God. I don't know if I believed in anything, but I believed in the futility and the hopelessness of my life. And now in this 4th step, he's bringing up, reminding me one of the reasons there's so much futility in your life is your life includes all these deep resentments you've just written down. It couldn't be any other way than the way it is. And if you don't find some way to get rid of those, you cannot have a drink of whiskey in the next 20 years, and your life is still going to be as miserable and as futile as it is today. It ain't the drinking, it's the self-reliance and these resentments. To the precise extent that we permit these, do we, and look this word up sometimes. It's become a favorite of mine, not because I love it, but because it is such a perfect description. Do we squander the hours? I'll let you look that word up for yourself, but it's I don't want any more squandering in my life today. How many of you were like me in the beginning and say, oh, I've wasted so much of my life. I wish I'd have done this 20 years ago. Well, you didn't. The only thing I can do is look at it from where I am now, and don't worry about any time you may have wasted, because in the 11th chapter, he's going to cover that. He's going to say,
Gary, give you 5 minutes.
The greatest days of our existence lie before us. And that's true. Dang, I'm going too slow on this. Well, you got to read that. I don't know if I'll get all the fourth step. You know, the thing he had me do that I've done ever since then is, he said, did you pray for all those people? And I said, no. And he said, well, let's go do that. It says in the book, we look the list over again. We can see how they dominated us, how these resentments had to be mastered, and this was our course. We asked God, and my sponsor said, Gary, that's a prayer. So he had me in his presence go down all of that first column, name by name, and praying for each one of them individually. God saved me from being angry at my dad. Save me from being angry by them. And then the next one is a prayer. Show me how to be helpful. And I promise you that after doing that, 2/3 of the list of resentments disappeared from just looking at them in the light of day and doing the prayer. Now, 1/3 didn't. So there's more work to be done. Then we turn to the fears. And I'm not even going to get into fears. I don't have time. I'm going to tell you that for me, I'm a big word person. I've heard 1,000 times, we got to look at our part in it. I love the order that Bill writes the fourth step in the book. First, he says, we resolutely look for our mistakes. For me, that's a big word in the spiritual walk. He's not saying that you and I set out to just blow up our lives. We've made mistakes after the other, one after one. And what you're going to find, people, is none of you are that good at being that bad. And that if you're like me, and I thought I had done hundreds of things, I did the same 5 or 6 patterns over and over and over again. And I identified those in those 4th column. Most of mine were dishonesty and self-centeredness. Some were frightened and some were selfish, but they're all there in that 4th column. And that's as far as we're going to get. I want to tell you that I want to say one more thing on this. So look at it in light of that. Having things removed rather than added. I can go out today and say that I'm going to redo my house and I'm going to repaint it. and I could make it look good for a couple of months. But if I don't replace some of those rotten pieces of lumber, if I don't take those off, if I don't do recalking and stuff, that paint job's not going to last very long. 4 and 5 is the process of being rid of. The additions come later, starting about the end of step 9. We call them the promises. If I'm constipated, I want to get unconstipated. And steps 4 and 5 really helped that process. So Lily, I didn't get all the way I wanted to, but it's okay. I don't know that much about 6 and 7, so I can probably cheat a little on those two.
You'll make it.